One of the most controversial policies was the religious policy. Europe had been hit by religious war. Since the Reformation, there have been religious wars across Europe, particularly France, and there was a perception if you didn't deal with schism in your own country, there was a risk that you could, the civil war might erupt. And England had a problem with a strident religious minority. We think of them as being Puritans, although that term started as a term of abuse. And certainly James I and Charles I recognized that they had a Puritan problem that they needed to address. You know, would the Puritans cause so much trouble that they would ultimately end up being seditious? How do we keep them in check? There was also the problem that, having inherited three kingdoms, there were different religious cultures and different ecclesiastical establishments in all of the kingdoms. Ireland did effectively have an Anglican church, but it was a church of the minority. The majority of the population was Catholic. And how did you help promote Protestantism in Ireland without alienating too many of the Catholic population? How did you promote the right sort of Protestantism in Ireland so you weren't encouraging Puritanism to spread there? Scotland had had a reformation that had been carried out in the absence of a monarch. There had been a revolution that had overthrown Mary Queen of Scots, and the Scottish Church had initially developed independent of the crown. And when James VI, who inherited the Scottish crown when he was 13 months old, when he eventually reached the age of maturity, he found it essential to try and reimpose royal discipline, royal control over the church. So he wanted to revive bishops. And then when he became, he wanted to revive episcopacy. When he became King of England, he also wanted to try and bring the churches in the three kingdoms into closer harmony with each other, because as a divinely ordained monarch, as he saw himself, who was responsible to God and accountable to God for upholding the true religion, it was important for him to try and establish a true religion, the true religion across his realm. So he needed to bring them closer together. Doing that inevitably ruffled feathers. Puritans were upset, Scottish Presbyterians were upset. There was an attempt to impose English-style ceremonies in Scotland, which the Scots got very upset about. Charles I built on this project and pushed it even further. And so he tried to clamp down on Puritan practices. He took the church in England in a more ceremonial direction. He emphasized ceremonies which Puritans thought of as being idolatrous, such as kneeling for communion, bowing to the altar. He tried to make the Scots worship more like the English. And when he tried to make the Scots do that, they rose in rebellion against him. And that begins the troubles that are going to erupt eventually in civil war.